And I was telling you guys that on this podcast, I was going to talk a little bit about my wife's accident. For those of you that don't know, my wife got into a car accident this past Saturday, and then Sunday it was my birthday. So this weekend definitely was an adventurous one. If that's the word that you want to use. But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. First and foremost, she's doing well. By the grace of God, she came out of the car crash with her life, with some bumps, bruises, and cuts. She's still a little sore. She's still having some headaches. She had a little pain in her leg. So, she got banged up in the car crash. But I just wanted to kind of talk about that whole experience and how everything kind of went down and just share a couple things from our heart. But yeah, Saturday my wife was heading out to work. She works at the local hospital in the city over from us, and she was heading to work, and pretty much, she had just left the house. It probably wasn't even 10 minutes after she left the house. I receive a call, and she's like, honey, she's kind of panting, like, I've been in a car accident. And so I jump up. My sons, they're in the family room just hanging out. I jump up. I grab them. I tell them, come on, and I think my son, Trevor Jr., he heard her on the speaker saying she was in an accident. So he was like, Mom's in an accident. So we all kind of just jumped up a little panicky and threw our sneakers and stuff on and, jumped in the car and rushed over there. Definitely saw the concern on my son's faces. For those of you that don't know, my son Trevor Jr. is 9 and my son Trayvon is 8. So, they definitely was concerned about their mommy, like, what's going on with mom? So we rushed to the scene. And I pull up right in, almost in the middle of the scene, like right where all the police officers and stuff is at, and jumped out, to see how she was doing. They allowed me to stay there. One of the officers said, listen, I know this is your wife. Go ahead. Right now you're not in the way, even though I'm almost like in the midst of the scene, but he said I was fine. So, I was thankful for that because I was able to just kind of stand there with her next to the van, and just talk to her and just see how she was feeling. The van was totaled. Didn't even really get a chance to look at the other cars because they were a little down. I just was really concerned about her and just trying to figure out what was going on with her. I saw one young lady that was kind of sitting over there on the grass. She seemed to be, just kind of like my wife, a little frantic and panicked. And, basically the ambulance came and picked both of them up. But, when my wife explained to me, how the accident happened, I was like, wow, just a month and a half ago. And some of you guys, I don't know if you remember, you guys that follow me on the Eat Up Mondays, I talked about good intentions aren't always God intentions. And just talking about how sometimes we have good intentions where we want to help people, and there's certain things that we may do for people or just do in general that may be within themselves. It may seem to be good or may be good, but sometimes it's not always what God wanted us to do. And one of the scenarios that I use to explain what I meant, or when somebody, they have good intentions but it can be disastrous, is as I talked about how sometimes when people are driving, they may be driving on the right of way. They may have the green light or just have the flow of the traffic. And for whatever reason, and a lot of times it's just trying to, be helpful and be nice to somebody. They'll stop and allow somebody to either cut across the street or turn into the oncoming traffic because maybe they've been waiting there for a while or whatever have you. And what happens a lot of times is the car that's coming behind them in the same direction that they were flowing, the car that has stopped, they don't see these individuals that they're letting cross the street, whether they're walking or whether they're driving. And unfortunately, even though they had good intentions in what they were doing, there's been times where they've allowed a family to walk across the street when they shouldn't have, and unfortunately been struck by a car and killed. So that was one of the scenarios that I used to talk about, the point that I was trying to make. And basically, that's exactly what happened with my wife. Basically, she was coming down. It's a 2-lane street, Barnum Avenue, and she's coming down the street. There's a car in the left lane. She's in the right, and it's just stopped there. She doesn't really know why it stopped, but the light is green, so she's just flowing, just flowing with the traffic, flowing with the lights. not knowing that a car that was coming in the opposite direction, the car that has stopped, is allowing them to make a left turn down the street when they shouldn't have. They should have just kept going and let them turn when they had the opportunity to turn. And because the car that was allowing the other car to turn was an SUV, my wife couldn't see over it. And so now all of a sudden this car just turns out of nowhere, and my wife didn't even have an opportunity to stop, to even hit the brakes before hitting it. So it was a super hard impact, even though they were on the street and wasn't going that fast. Just the fact that she wasn't able to brake it just was crazy. So she was shooken up. I got there, it was just glass everywhere, all over the scene. She was pent in there. Some of her, she had hit her head. I don't know if it was the airbag or the steering wheel, and she's still having little headaches from that. But basically, it even took a little piece of the front of her hair off. So it was a very hard impact. And like I said, I'm thankful. My sons are thankful, that she's alive and that she was able to go to the hospital and then come home that night. And, my wife, with, being who the type of person she is, she gets to the hospital because the hospital where they take her, that's where she actually works, as a respiratory therapist. And, in this season with the COVID patients and all of that, I mean, they're working like overtime. They're going crazy trying to just, especially with the spike, there's been an increase in a lot of areas. So, she gets there and gets cleared, and she tries to work, because she don't want them to be short. She didn't want them to be short or whatever have you. But her supervisor ended up sending her home. She was kind of limping a little bit, which he did the right thing. I'm thankful that he did that because, I know her. She would have wanted to try to stay and help out, which is a good thing. But, I was glad that she was able to come home that night and kind of rest up. But it was just a crazy experience. My sons and I are truly grateful to the Lord for obviously sparing her life and for her not, being even hurt beyond what she was hurt, and even sparing everybody else's life, because nobody died or nobody was seriously injured. So I'm just thankful for that. I mean, it wasn't her fault. So, we got to figure out how all of that's going to work out, because the person that allowed them to turn in is the one that is at fault. So even the person that turned in, they're probably trying to figure out what's going on as well. But it looks like the person that even allowed them to turn in was the one that was at fault. And it was just so ironic that, I had talked about that like a month and a half ago, because this car that was stopped in the middle of the road, I'm sure they didn't mean anything malicious. It wasn't nothing negative. They were just trying to allow somebody to turn in. But unfortunately, that's just not how, the traffic, works. When, that's just not how, we're supposed to do things. When if the light is green and you have the right of way, you're supposed to just keep going. And sometimes it's very hard to just not let somebody in, because we know what it is to be at an intersection and just be waiting, especially at a busy intersection, and cars are just passing and passing and passing and nobody's letting you in. We all know that feeling, but yet and still, we still just have to follow the rules, because sometimes things like this come out of it and it could be disastrous. And I just remember that message and talking about that. And I was talking about that scripture, Proverbs 14:12, where it says, "There's a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death." So there are times where, we make decisions and we do things and they seem right to us, like this is the right thing to do. But unfortunately, some of those things can lead to death, whether that's physically, mentally or spiritually. So, it just was really crazy for me to have talked about that, just maybe over a month ago, and to see my wife go through that. But like I said, I am very thankful that she is alive and that she is well and that everybody else is well. And the ironic thing is too, this happened around, almost 7 o'clock in the evening, and just 2 in the morning, maybe 6 hours later, 7 hours later, there was an accident not too far from where she had the accident, on the highway, on one of the throughways near where she had the accident at, where two people crashed head on and both people died. So